this. Back and forth.
Yeah.
You got scalped, huh?
Yeah.
I like it.
Every once in a while. No, he cuts it himself.
Cut you.
Yeah, he lets me do it every once in a while, but I don't take it really enough, so.
You have a professional pair of barbers.
Yeah, professional.
You're nice.
No, just regular clippers.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, we just have clippers. I do the boys there.
Not hand clippers.
No, the buzzers,
Right.
yeah.
Oh my God. How do you get the back?
Very carefully.
Yeah, really? Oh.
Yeah, I like it. You know where I'm gonna come get my next haircut. If you do mine easy, you can see.
You could do it as a fundraiser
Yeah.
or something. I did, what was it? The cancer walk a couple years ago, and there was somebody there doing haircuts.
Haircuts.
Oh, what's it called? Because they bring their stuff here. Every year there's the
Yeah, the Walk for Life or
yeah, whatever that
Yeah.
walk. Yeah.
You cut the
Relay for
boys.
Life. Relay for Life.
Yeah,
Relay for
yeah.
Life. Relay for
Yeah.
Life. Yes.
I like you cut the kids here.
How the baby pigs doing?
Good.
You guys so big.
They're growing fast, huh?
Yeah.
I'm
They're more
anxious.
friendly than the other
Yeah.
ones.
I'm
We have
anxious
two
to see
different
them.
levels of babies
Yeah.
right now.
They gotta take care of the male one, the teenager.
Oh, you haven't done that yet?
No, I want them to get a.
I wouldn't be worried about it. Just get rid of
Yeah.
them when they're like 6 months old. Don't let them get
Well,
full
we
term.
have those, and
Yeah.
then we got some more, different breeds.
Yeah.
You shoot back deer.
Oh,
They're not fixed.
we have a whole bunch
You ever tried one?
chicks.
No.
My basement's full of chicks right now.
Yeah.
I think if
So
you
we're
have
probably
one
an
that's...
incubator for
Well, I think you gotta
Christmas,
kill it
so-
before it's 100 pounds though.
I'm incubating a
That's
ton
okay.
of chicks, really. But I have most
I'm gonna
of
do
them
that with
sold,
a couple of mine, I
and
think.
then, some
You
I'm
are?
gonna keep for like keepers
Which are
and
early?
stuff, and then I'm gonna
A
try
couple,
to sell
just a
some
couple.
puppies.
Yeah.
You have
Can't see
laying
feeding
hens
four
also?
just for...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, because you made the
We only need
with
it.
all of your products.
Yeah.
for her and
You have a
me.
big freezer too,
We
right?
do,
I
they're
got-
kind of
yeah, I
like
got
on a
3
strike right
freezers.
now, because
Yeah.
it's so cold.
Yeah.
I got 2 uprights and a big chest.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they don't want to get out of the coop, because all the snow and everything.
Store it.
Oh,
Me either.
Oh, look, if you kill them when they're that
All
small,
their body heave and
doesn't
stuff.
take long to
Plus
eat
they
them
don't
up.
have
They're not
Right.
that big. Once you skin them.
you can knit them some little booties.
Do you still
Yeah,
get
that would
bacon
be
out of
cute.
them?
People knit them little.
I eat mine all fresh anyway.
Oh, you don't smoke any of them?
Not, typically if I do it myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I salt it and then smoke it with corn cobs and apple tree wood. It doesn't come out like yours. That's I know, Conway meat.
Yeah.
Yeah. How much a pound do they charge you to do that?
The whole thing is like
They're so weird.
How much?
$125.
That's not that
And
bad.
to get it smelled
Like 80 plus
it's
60.
half of it.
Yeah, that was everything.
Do you smoke your hams too?
That was the hand.
See, I like my hams fresh. Like what you gave me, that pork steak.
Yeah, we had that the other night too.
It's excellent.
Yeah.
Thick too, nice and tender.
Thank you, Ashton.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to worship here at Bethel United Methodist Church. We're so glad to have you all here. And if you're joining us from afar, good to see you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. What announcements do we have this morning to share for the life of this church?
This Saturday, they're starting fundraising for the annex and for the front entryway for the floor. Five of them are doing it in 7 hours, 7 classes right in a row.
Oh, this Saturday.
This coming Saturday, and folks are excited.
I'm super excited.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Well, give me a schedule when you
Yeah,
get it.
there's a
too.
poster. There's some
And,
posters made
I'm
up.
thinking, and they're gonna make flyers?
Yeah, we've got some.
That'll be good, because I'll take some and put them
Yeah.
over there.
Oh, at the Bethel Inn?
Yeah, and for me, and if I can make one, then I'll know better.
I got some extras.
And I think
Yeah, some of them.
one of the classes is just for like meditation too. It's not really
Right,
yoga,
it's
right?
Karen's doing that, yeah.
Yeah. So if you're interested in yoga at all, or even just meditation, we got the fundraiser for the annex hosted by all of our yoga instructors. Other announcements this morning.
First Lenten lunch is March 14th.
Yes.
It's gonna be here before we blink.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in charge of it, so if you can provide soup, we'll be doing it with the Bethel Episcopal House Church. So we'll be teaming up to provide the soup and bread and whatever else we need to do. But if you can do one of those things, we would love to have that, and cookies as well. I think is something. Maybe I heard cookies someplace this week. So so March 14th is a Thursday from 12:30 to 1:30. We'll be over at the West Parish Congregational Church up on the hill for those weeks. So come on out, it's a good time. And I'll be doing the thing, the sermonette. Other announcements this morning. This upcoming week we have the United Methodist Church will be gathering as a whole beginning on Saturday for a day of prayer before our special general conference. And we'll talk more about that downstairs. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, we'll talk more about that downstairs to give you a full picture of what's happening at our biggest level, the general conference of our church. So, anything else? Then let's take a deep breath together in and out as we make the transition from getting here to being here. Let's stand as we're able, turn in our bulletin to our opening prayer. And this morning it's a unison opening prayer as opposed to a responsive one. So we'll be reading this all together, okay? God of blessings and woes, bless us this day with lives filled with love, care, and generosity, and deep abiding hope.
We pray that your kingdom will dwell among all people, and that we may be instruments of your love and your grace. Open our hearts with the joy of healing a world filled with brokenness and pain. In the name of the one who taught us the ways of light and love, be in our worship, in our very lives.
Amen. Let us remain standing as we are able. Turn in our hymnals to 732 and sing, Come We That Love the Lord.
Around the throne.
down. Okay. I want maybe adults. You got it. If you want to come up, there's candy involved. So I want you to line up. Okay, everyone make a straight line.
Straight.
Kind of like side by side. Obviously, you're confused.
One behind the other.
Just make a line. Now, who is first in the line?
Mariah.
You. Mariah, I'm going to give you this entire bag of candy.
Whoa.
Fair enough.
And then I don't have anything else for anyone else in the line.
Uh-oh.
I take that back.
Oh! Now, what happens if the line isn't this way? What happens if I'm over here? Does the line order change?
Yep.
Are you first now? So you get the entire bag of candy? This morning we're going to be sharing this story that Jesus says about blessings and woes. Now blessings, does anyone know what a blessing is? It's like getting free candy. Yeah? Now the world, in your daily life you would think that everyone should, who works really hard, gets the best candy, right? If you work really hard, you get good candy, right? That's what's supposed to happen according to the world. Here I'm going to start chucking out candy this morning. So eyes up, everybody.
Eyes up. Free candy on the floor.
Nikki. All right. Linda. Bob. Ooh, good catches all around. Now to the other side of the room. All right.
All right, Doreen.
So, Musa, you ready? You got this. I believe in you. Oh, so close.
Very
So blessings are like that, according to the world, that everyone gets a piece of candy, right? Everyone deserves to get the same amount of candy. But in God's kingdom, the person who's last in line gets extra candy.
Oh. Whoa.
Yeah. And you get extra candy, and you get extra candy, and you get extra candy. And so we're hearing this story about blessings and woes, blessings that are for those who are way at the end of the line, way on the outside, people who don't even know that they're in line yet. And then people who are in first, woes, because you've already gotten your reward for being first in line. Don't worry, I'm not going to take your candy from you. So I wanted to use this metaphor this morning to help you understand what it means. That the kingdom of God is for everyone, especially those way out on the outside who don't think that they have it all together. Okay? Can we pray together this morning and then we'll head back to our seats? We're going to do a repeat after prayer repeat after me prayer this morning. So I'll say a line and then you'll say it back and we'll go like that. Dear God, we thank you.
We thank you.
We thank you for your blessings.
We thank you for your blessings.
Help us to understand
Help us to understand
that everything
that everything
is a blessing
is a blessing
from you.
from you.
Amen.
Amen.
All right, thanks so much for coming up, everybody. Whew. It is getting really warm, right?
Oh,
Yeah. Let's crack open this door.
It is fun.
Let's stand as we're able. Turn in our faith. We sing the little black hymnals to 2155 and sing Blessed Are They. As we enter into our time of prayer together this morning, let us turn in our bulletin to the prayer of confession that is printed there, and let us begin there with that prayer. Gentle God,
loving guardian, heal our foolish ways. We long to forsake the advice of the wicked and the slow seduction of sinful paths. But our speech and actions often belie us. We yearn to be like trees planted beside living waters, bearing the fruit of righteousness in due season. But the seed of scoffers calls to us, and the temptation to return evil for evil withers our souls like shrubs in the desert. Our hearts seek the ways of your Spirit and the waters of life, but our footsteps lead us into arid desert sands. This is not your hope and plan for us. Forgive us. Turn us again to the healing you so freely offer, and mend the brokenness in our lives and in our world. Amen.
Let us continue to pray to God in the silence of our hearts. God looks at us in our brokenness and offers blessings to all who turn to the Lord. With the assurance of God's faithful love, choose this day to be people of blessings. Amen. What are the joys and concerns that you come with this morning? Yeah.
That my bird said his first words.
Your bird said their first words.
What was it?
Yeah.
Pretty bird.
Oh,
Pretty bird.
say that all the time.
Cute. I was not expecting to hear that this morning, but yay. Bob.
I'm blessed to have Angel for a wife.
Aww.
Musa.
I have a lot of concerns this morning.
Oh,
no.
As we were coming to church, I wish we could even have thoughts of these people whom we do not know. They had a very bad accident at the top of Merrifield Hill. The car was upside down with the front of it dived right into the snowbank right beside the driveway of that house that's right at the top of the hill. And there were ambulances, and we had a long wait.
Yeah.
Also, Mary Hester passed away this week. She used to be in our church a lot, and so we will miss her. I also read the paper this morning, a dear friend of mine, which I have not seen for many years because she's been in a nursing home, passed away. I guess a good thought is I spoke with Joan Cole. She seems to be doing quite well, and she wishes to thank everyone who sent her cards.
Yeah.
And oh, I forgot that Barbara Gallant is in the hospital with a broken pelvis because she fell.
Yeah.
I guess you want everyone to know it. Be very careful when you walk into Rite Aid because she was wearing cleats and she fell on.
That's where she fell at Rite Aid? Inside with the cleats on, yeah.
Don't wear them inside.
Poor thing. Some of them, yeah.
She will be going to Norway. She'll be in Norway rehab in just a few days.
Yeah.
She's doing okay.
Yeah. Linda.
I have a joy about my husband. Those little pigs that we have make you happy. And it's just a riot. He talks to those pigs. You'd think they were dogs.
But they respond like dogs.
They do. But it's been a joy seeing them come alive.
It's better than any TV show.
Really?
It is.
They're
Just
smart
watching them.
animals, too.
Just watching them.
Animals bring a lot of joy for folks.
Yeah.
Brings out the nice human compassion for us too.
Yeah. Others this morning? Nikki.
I have my granddaughter up. I'm going to be taking her for half a week every week to help the mom because she works full time, and they're moving because they found out they have lead paint in their apartment, so she had to move in with her mom, and my son had to move in with me, so we're splitting up the time, but it's a joy to have her.
Yeah. So for time with family and hopefully the lead paint gets resolved quickly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there lead paint laws in Maine?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's really strict ones.
Yeah, they're going to be moving.
Massachusetts.
Yeah, the landlord refuses to do anything.
Massachusetts, they tell you to just give whoever gets lead paint poisoning, give them the deed, give them the keys.
School vacation week this week, so
Yeah. For all those who are on vacation and for parents and guardians who are doing extra double duty this week. Yep. Nancy?
Well, my joy for this week is that my 3 great nieces are coming to visit. School vacation, I guess, everywhere. And we always go cross-country skiing at Carter's. And well, my sister, who's their grandmother, says we're doing that until we're no longer able. So I guess we're doing it. So country.
Yeah.
We went last year, right?
yeah.
So we didn't see him last year.
Yeah. No, they get snowed out.
Oh, we did?
I stopped. They went without me the day before. I have to take off. But that's a joy.
Yeah. And so hopefully everyone is able to make it down the mountain multiple times. And
No
safely.
mountain, cross country.
Oh, cross country.
Little hills.
Okay,
Yeah, little
good.
hills, little hills.
The tea was really nice, and it was really nice, Musa, seeing you connect with Phyllis Cross.
Yes.
You two had a lot of,
How was it Valentine's?
it was nice, and that was a nice connection seeing that. And she was so pleased to see, what, picture of her mother on the wall, or her grandmother?
2 grandmothers.
Oh, yeah, there was a strong connection there, that was kind of interesting.
Cool.
I'm traveling next week. I'm a bit concerned. I get super anxious every time I'm about to travel, and I'm trying not to be anxious about it, but
You driving?
flying.
Yeah.
And I'm flying out of Portland for the first time. I usually will just drive into Logan because that's what I'm familiar with, and there's better flights. But
Portland's nice.
I decided to try Portland this
I
time,
love smaller.
and yeah.
Much easier.
Yeah.
Easy airport.
So we'll hold you in prayer this week.
Thank you,
Yeah.
because I will be very anxious.
You already are.
Yeah.
It's okay. You'll something.
Deep breath.
Yeah. Breathe.
I actually have a joy this morning. I was last week, just a week ago, on Thursday, I had my big interview with the Board of Ordained Ministry, and I was passed. Visual level. Thank you. Yeah.
So what's the next step? Or you get
3 years of probation and with some extra training, and not that I don't already have a lot of training,
Yes.
but there's always more, and then I'll be able to apply for Elder in full connection. So
Oh, sweet.
yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. Big weight off my shoulders. Others this morning?
The tea was really nice.
Yeah.
That's a joy.
Yeah.
The sun is out, it's a joy.
Yeah.
The snow, I've never seen so much snow in such
Oh,
a
this
second.
is,
I
it's huge.
am all over the roof, I don't know what to do with it.
Then let's turn all of these over to God in prayer. God, it's clear that our lives are full. We have lots on our plates, lots to be concerned about, and lots to have joy about. Help us to know that you are in it all, that you're working through everything for your good. We give you thanks for those things that have given us deep joy this morning, for relationships with people and with our pets, with time with family, and for the joy of animal life, for the sun being out, for connections together over tea, and for successes. We give you thanks. God, help us to remember that you are still moving, even in those places where we hurt this morning. Be with the person or persons who was in that terrible accident this morning. Be with the families of those who have passed on to you. And Lord, when we need some extra healing, like Barbara does, may your hands be working there too. Help us to let go of our anxiety and our fears and turn all of it over to you. For we know that it's in your precious name that we are able to do all things. And in that name we pray this prayer that Jesus taught us. Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever.
Amen. Let us stand as we are able, turn in our hymnals to 529 and sing How Firm a Foundation. This morning our scripture lesson comes from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 6, verses 17 through 26. This morning I'll be reading from the Message version of the scriptures. It's a paraphrase. It's a way that shifts the language into slightly more modern context, and that'll help us hopefully hear it in some new ways. Coming down off the mountain with them, Jesus stood on a plain, surrounded by disciples, and was soon joined by a huge congregation from all over Judea and Jerusalem, even from the seaside towns of Tyre and Sidon. They had come both to hear him and to be cured of their ailments. Those disturbed by evil spirits were healed. Everyone was trying to touch him. So much energy surged from him, so many people healed. Then he spoke. You're blessed when you've lost it all. God's kingdom is there for the finding. You're blessed when you're ridiculously, ravenously hungry. Then you're ready for the messianic meal. You're blessed when the tears flow freely. Joy comes with the morning. Count yourself blessed every time someone cuts you down or throws you out, every time someone smears or blackens your name to discredit me. What it means is that the truth is too close for comfort, and that person is uncomfortable. You can be glad when that happens. Skip like a lamb, or maybe a pig, if you like. For even though they don't like it, I do. And all heaven applauds. And you know that you're in good company. My preachers and witnesses have always been treated like this. But it's trouble ahead if you think you have it made. When you have what you have is all you'll ever get. And it's trouble ahead if you're satisfied with yourself. Yourself will not satisfy you for long. And it's trouble ahead if you think life's all fun and games, there's suffering to be met, and you're going to meet it. There's trouble ahead when you live only for the approval of others, saying what flatters them, doing what indulges them. Popularity contests are no truth contests. Look how many scoundrel preachers were approved by your ancestors. Your task is to be true, not popular. The word of God for the people of God. Let us pray. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts together be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. This morning, we continue our sermon series on seeing all the people. Over these 4 weeks, we'll be looking at the crowds that have surrounded Jesus' life and ministry. Each of these crowds or groups of people that Jesus is in ministry with, he gives a slightly different message to. Last week, we heard about Jesus calling some of his first disciples out onto boats. Remember that story from last week? About how the disciples were just finishing up cleaning their nets after a long night of fishing. And then Jesus walks up to them and says, let's go back out. This man who's probably never fished a day in his life is telling these fishermen whose livelihood it is how to do their job. And yet they go. They go back out onto the water, and doing so find this abundance of fish, enough to swamp the boat. Next week, next Sunday, we'll talk about the crowds that are full of questions, which is pretty timely with it being the opening day of this special session of General Conference that will affect the entire future of the United Methodist Church. And then finally on March 3rd, we'll talk about the astounded crowds, the crowds that have seen Jesus transformed on Transfiguration and are astounded. But today we talk about the expectant crowds. We come to church with all sorts of expectations, don't we? Right? So, you show up at 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning, right? Expecting there to be worship.
Yeah.
Yeah? You walk into this space, or maybe a space like it, and you kind of expect that maybe the chairs or pews will be all lined up and facing one direction, right? Especially if we're out in the other room, where there are pews that have been drilled into the ground. It would be a lot if those were changed. You expect that there will be a bulletin, right? To kind of tell you what's going to be happening that day. And you're expected that the accompanist, thank you Louisa, or a tech person who's able to play the CDs has prepared and can play what they're actually going to do. Thank you, Louisa. We expect that we know at least sort of what's going to happen on a Sunday morning, right? Right? We expect that there's some things that will sort of happen every Sunday. And it'll probably happen for about an hour, unless the preacher gets going. And we have all sorts of these expectations about church. And they can range from these simple things, these unnoticed things, to having other expectations. We can also have expectations that maybe we won't be asked to do anything too hard, that we'll just be able to sit down and listen for an hour. We might be expecting to hear words of comfort and joy, and that hopefully will leave happy and content. That's an expectation that we can have. We expect that not too much will be asked of us and that we're just going to get filled right up. And so we have all these expectations. I mean, that's what I walk into a church and I expect. So it's not like a judgment statement that if you have those kinds of expectations, don't worry. That's what I expect when I walk into a church and what I expect when I walk into a worship service on a Sunday morning. I get it. I'm right there with you. And we have all these expectations. And what happens when those expectations aren't met? What happens when you walk in on a Sunday morning and someone is sitting in your pew? Sorry, I don't mean to look at anyone in particular. What happens when you walk in and someone's sitting in your pew? That throws you right off, right? What happens if the pews have been taken out of the sanctuary? Or maybe the chairs are arranged in a circle rather than in nice, neat little lines. What happens when you come in and there isn't a bulletin? What happens if I'm not here or Louisa isn't here? Does that throw off our expectations? Do we get thrown for a loop, right? When our expectations aren't met? We get unsettled and discombobulated, and we don't exactly know what's going to happen, and it can be scary. That's exactly what is happening in our scriptures this morning. Jesus has come down off the mountaintop, the place where he always goes with his disciples in tow. And as he's coming down, you have come out of your towns. You've heard about this Jesus guy. You've heard about this Jesus guy and the miracles that he's able to perform, and that he's this amazing teacher and preacher. Maybe you've even heard that he's the Messiah, the promised Messiah, the one who's supposed to come and create a new kingdom here and now, and so you have expectations that the Messiah will have a revolution, and so you're excited, and you're amped up for all of these possibilities that this Jesus guy has. And so you gather here at the foot of this mountain, where you know that he is, and you're standing there with this huge crowd surrounding you. This huge number of people. Maybe you've come with some of your friends from a local town, and you've made your way out of the city to this place, or maybe you've come from the towns of Tyre and Sidon, cities way on the outskirt of civilization, in a place that is rough, and so you have to scratch and claw just to make ends meet. And there's hundreds, thousands of other people gathered around, waiting. And as you wait, your expectations get ramped up. Oh, this is going to be the best thing. Jesus is going to come down off the mountaintop. And there's sick people, there's people who have incurable illnesses, there's people who have a cough that's lingered for 12 months, there are people with terrible mental illnesses, there are people who've had to be carried out to this place by their friends or their family, and there are people with evil spirits inside of them. Everyone has come to this place. And finally Jesus starts coming down off the mountain. And his 12 closest friends, followers, are there, right behind him. And as he passes among you, you feel the energy that he gives off. Energy that is life-giving. That is mind and body and soul healing, and the crowds press in. And Jesus is doing his best to reach out, touching people, move through the crowd in a zigzag manner in order to reach everyone. And the people are pressing in, and as they press in, you reach out, and you have the expectation that even if you just touch him, everything would be all right. And your fingertips, just the edge of a fingertip grazes his shawl that he's wearing. And your body feels better. And your mind is clear, and your soul is filled with such an abundance of peace that you've never known before. That peace that fills you is so deep and profoundly life-changing, and then Jesus speaks. And he's right there in front of you. And it sounds as if he's almost just speaking to you. You are blessed, Jesus says. You are blessed. And you have expectations around where this is going. You're blessed. Awesome. Right? We've felt that peace, so now we get it. We get the blessing. You are blessed. And you know where it's going. You're blessed when you've lost it all. Now, for any of you who've lost anything ever, right? Car keys, glasses, a dog, anything from as small from an item to losing a friend or a family member or someone who you loved, you don't feel very blessed, do you, when you've lost something? I feel lost when I've lost something. And so you look around and you think to yourself, I get that. Okay, maybe Jesus is just talking about that peace that he's talking about, the hope, right? It makes sense. Jesus, when we've lost it all, the blessing is that there's hope. Okay, that's fine. And so you think you get it. You're blessed when you've lost it all. God's kingdom is there for the finding. And so Jesus sets up this unrealistic expectation. You're blessed when you've lost it all, and then resolves it by saying God's kingdom is there for the finding. Okay, get that? And then Jesus says you're blessed when you're ravenously hungry. Okay, Jesus, what are you getting at? When I get hungry, I'll speak for myself here, I get hangry, right? And I snap. I get grumbly, and I lash out at friends and family, and oh yeah, and then we listen for more of what Jesus is going to say. Then you're ready for the messianic meal, the meal that we share around the table every month. You're ready for it. Oh, okay, that makes sense, right? So you're blessed when you're hungry because then you're ready for this meal. Okay, cool. But then we're blessed when our tears flow freely? Really, Jesus? What are you talking about? If I'm crying uncontrollably, I certainly don't feel blessed. And even if I know that joy comes in the morning, it still doesn't feel like a blessing in the moment, right? It feels awful. If you're crying uncontrollably, and so Jesus is setting up all of these expectations, these unrealistic expectations around when we are blessed. And he sets up this one more. We're supposed to count ourselves blessed when people tear us down. And when people drag our name through the mud because of Jesus. It certainly doesn't feel like much of a blessing, does it? When people are talking smack about us. It's not what you expect. It's not what you expect when you come to church. It's not what you would expect when you're going about your daily life. Because it just doesn't make sense. You're blessed when people are talking smack about you. It doesn't seem reasonable. It doesn't seem reasonable to count ourselves blessed when we're on the outs with people who we care about, or when we're on the outs with people at our job or at our school. It doesn't make sense to think that we're blessed in those moments when people are just being awful to us. And yet, Jesus tells us that we are to be so excited that we skip like the lambs in the face of adversity. That if we're the outsider, if we don't fit in, if we don't make it work, if we don't look or act or be in the same ways that the rest of the world is, God is going to bring us into new relationship, bring us new joy and blessings because of that. And Jesus tells us that it happened with all the prophets of old too, right? It happened with all of the prophets in the Old Testament. It happened with people like Moses and Daniel and David and Esther and Ruth. It happened with all these people on the outskirts of society. And yet, they have this amazing news that so few people want to hear because it goes so wildly against their expectations. And yet, Jesus promises us we'll be in good company. And then Jesus shifts gears. Woe. Woe to you. Woe to you. And you're like, whoa, no, Jesus, I came out here, I traveled all this way to this place in the middle of nowhere to be talked well to and to be healed. And you're supposed to be the Messiah, and yet you're here telling us about woe and that terrible things are going to happen. And it's just such a cognitive disconnect for you because you felt that peace that the presence of the Messiah has to offer. Trouble. There's trouble ahead. Trouble ahead if you think you have it made. Well, Jesus must be talking about someone else, right? Not about us, right? We shouldn't be thinking that we have it all made, right? So Jesus must be talking to someone else out there in the huge crowd. Woe to you. And woe to you if you're satisfied. If you're satisfied with yourself and your surroundings, Jesus says. Because you can only satisfy yourself for so long. And woe to you if life is all just fun and games. Because there's hard stuff coming down the pipeline that you have to face. And woe to you, and as Jesus keeps going and going, you realize that he's not just talking about other people, but he's talking about you as well. Woe to you if you only flatter people and indulge them. Woe to you if you think life is a popularity contest. And as Jesus keeps saying these things, your expectations keep getting undercut and undercut and undercut. And you keep looking for justification and looking around you and thinking that Jesus has to be talking to someone else. But that's not what Jesus is doing. Jesus is telling you and everyone else in the crowd, everyone else gathered here today, and everyone who's ever been gathered, and here's the deal. If you're fine with the status quo, if you think life is a game, if you think that you've made it and have all the answers, if you're content with just barely enough, if you think that you can glad hand your way through life, that's not going to cut it. That's not going to cut it, Jesus says. Your task is to be true, not popular. What does that do to your expectations? What does that even do to your expectations gathered here in the 21st century? 2,000 years after Jesus' time. We've had these words for that long, and yet they still somehow undercut our expectations. How do you begin to figure out your life now, knowing that those are what the expectations are? And you can't just live your life like you did before. How is your life different now that you've heard and seen the Messiah and heard that he has high expectations of you and of me? Amen. Let us stand as we are able, turn in our hymnal to 402 and sing, Lord, I Want to Be a Christian.
Holy, my heart.
And now let us, as a faithful response to all that God has given us, the expectation to be true with each other, let us give the gifts of our tithes and our offerings back up to God. These gifts, may they be a sign that we are living into your blessings, that we're living into your blessings here in this place and in this time right now, and that we go out from this place to be a blessing for others. Amen. Let us remain standing as we're able, turn into our hymnals to 733 and sing our final hymn this morning, We're Marching to Zion.
And
How are you different now that you've heard the message of Jesus Christ? How are you different? May you take that in your heart and go out from this place to live that difference wherever you go. Amen.
Amen. What day are you pointing out?
Tuesday.
Got a